was it perceived, like you said, it was quite encouraging for you? Was that surprising for you to have so many encouraging messages for somebody in our society as well?
Yeah, I think that was definitely surprising for me. I'd sort of, at the point where I decided, like, this is how I'm going to live my life, like, publicly, I kind of almost made my peace with being like, to live as who I need to be. Like, I think if I didn't do this, I would not be living a happy or remotely comfortable life. I sort of accepted that I would probably lose most of the family side, any of the spiritual side that I'd previously been party to. And I'd sort of just accepted that as like, you know what, this is something that's going to happen and it's fine. So then to have so many people like from our spiritual community and even from my family, like especially some elder members of my family sort of message me and reach out and be like, we didn't know this was a thing, but now we do know and we love you. So we're going to do our best to support you. And that was really, really nice. Obviously that's not universally been what it's like, but it was definitely a way higher proportion of support than I thought there would be. So that was really great.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, when I saw that Facebook post and I messaged you straight afterwards as well,
yeah,
for me it was because I knew you as a person. Like it may be wrong, it may be right, but because I knew you, I always wanted to support you in whatever you wanted to do. Because you've always been such a wonderful person to be around. And to me, it didn't matter what you wanted to be. Like if you were male, female, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Like because you were such a great person to be around and you've always lived such a beautiful life that I think I was so encouraged to be like, I'll support you. Like you've got my support if you ever need it, whatever that means. So I think that's more testament to you. But
thank you.
Yeah, but let's get into that a little bit. So how you were as a person. So when did this idea come? Because again, like I said, I'm completely ignorant about this. And for me, myself, like I've always felt male my whole life. I've always felt being a man my whole life. There are times when my artistic side comes out that I can be a little bit more feminine. But when did this begin for you and how did the journey start with you internally?
Yeah, well, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint things without playing into the classic sort of gender stereotypes because, I mean, this is a slight segue, but in terms of sort of medical stuff, in order to, if you're a trans person who wants to access some form of like medical healthcare to support you on your transition, you sort of have to go through a lot of tick boxes where you have to say things like, oh, I always knew I was a boy because my favorite color was always blue, which is, if you actually think about it, that doesn't really mean anything. So that's something that's always quite hard in trying to be like, oh, this is when I knew because I started doing boyish things, because I don't massively think there's such a thing as boyish things. Like you said, if you feel masculine, then that's in itself. But I don't subscribe to the whole like there are some activities for feminine people and there are some activities for masculine people. But having said that, I sort of, when I was going through puberty, which I think is a weird time, whoever you are, I definitely felt like just very uncomfortable with everything that was happening. And I sort of just put that down to like, oh, but everyone feels uncomfortable during puberty. But then I think I saw like some post online that was about a trans man. And I literally had never heard of the idea of someone being trans before. And I sort of read it and was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then just did a deep dive. And after about like, I think 3 hours of just like intensively researching stuff, I was like, oh man, I think this might be me. But obviously that was just like the first like click moment. I didn't tell anyone about it. And obviously I didn't do anything. This was when I was like 13 or something. And then a couple of months or so later, I sort of was typing, it sounds really strange because I don't think anyone who is 13 today would do this, but I was typing out like an email draft just to like get my thoughts out of my head. But I never intended to send the email. I was just typing it out and I didn't have a phone and I didn't want to write it down on paper because someone might find it. So I was like, oh, I'll just write down an email draft to get everything out of my head. And then I sent the email by accident to one of my friends. And then they sort of like messaged me like, do you want to talk about this? Like what's going on? And then that's what sort of just made everything real and set stuff in motion for me. But yeah, it was definitely a process of working stuff out. I don't think I can really say that there was like a feeling of being boyish because I liked blue and I played football or whatever. It was just like oh no, I just feel like a man.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is very interesting because this is where it gets a bit nuanced, right? It gets a bit more detail oriented. It's not like it's either this or it's either that, like I'll wake up one day and all of a sudden I'm more attracted to this person than that person. It's not like that, right? It's much more nuanced. And again, like you said, like my favorite color is like gray and pink, but but when we typically, then that would that mean that I'm more feminine, therefore I'm female? And I know you're not saying that, but so I want to speak about the process that you went through from that point onwards. So was it just like a nagging thought in the back of your head, or did you start researching more things and speaking to more people to get more clarity about what was happening inside of you?
Yeah, so for the first few months or so, it was more like just a nagging thought in the back of my head. I sort of, for the first few months actually, I just tried to ignore it because I was like, this is probably just like, I almost felt like it was the same sort of thing where, when you've got a headache and you look up headache symptoms, like why have I got a headache online? And it's like, you've got cancer. To my 13-year-old brain, I was like, well, this is like that. It's definitely not me. I'm just going to ignore it. But then I was like, but I find these people really interesting. So I will do some more research. And then once I told one of my friends accidentally, she bought me some books, they were all fiction books and they weren't specifically about trans people. They were just about the weirdness of gender, and, masculine people presenting feminine and feminine people presenting masculine, and then just people presenting anywhere in between. And just to see someone show some kindness towards even that thought process was sort of allowed me to be like, okay, maybe thinking about this is not such a terrible thing. So from then on, it was a bit of research, a bit of help from friends actually researching stuff and sending me stuff and being like, does this feel like you? Do you want to talk about this? And having that support from friends, I think, was really important. It sort of stayed that way for a good few years until I became more confident and cut my hair and started dressing in different clothes and things like that. At the beginning of sixth form, so when I was 16, pretty much all of my close friends used a different name, my current name, Kieran, and he, him pronouns for me. So that was sort of a very gradual process from, being 13 and being like, oh, I think that's me. And then that's 3 years of hard thought and slowly working up confidence in who I felt I was. I came out at school when I was 17. I came out at school to teachers and everyone when I was 17. And then I came out to everyone, including family and all of that, when I was 18. And then from then on, it's just been, that's it.
So for me, my friends would probably understand me more than my family will do sometimes, because you interact with them much more. You know them on a different level. You can be completely open with them. That's why you're friends with them, right? But for with me and family, I'm always hiding parts of myself when I'm with them, because they see your version of you, and especially in an Indian household, they see oh, this is
definitely
that they know that I have to keep representing that. So how was that for you, speaking to your mom and your dad and your brother? Because I know you're such a close family as well. How was that for you, and how was it for them as well, simultaneously?
I mean, it was definitely difficult, I think, because there was a lot of hiding stuff. So even though I told my friends everything, there was that sort of broken trust, or just feeling like I couldn't tell my parents about it. And that's not necessarily on them. Something that I think is always really important to remember with anything that you tell your family or people that you're close to, is that even if I said, all of my friends and stuff had gotten used to it by the time I was 16. So I'd been sitting with that feeling for about 3 years. then when you tell something that they've not been sitting with it for 3 years, what you get from them is their immediate reaction. They've not had that time to process it. So even though you can be upset at their reaction, you have to acknowledge that, like, you know, I was upset too at the beginning when I was working stuff out. And you have to give them that time to process it. So yeah, I will admit that it was hard, and it was definitely really hard for them as well. So that was difficult for on both sides. But it's a lot better now. And like you said, I think it's quite difficult in sort of the Indian community, and especially like the strict religious Indian community. There is that fear of like, people aren't going to accept me, and more than that, like, people will actively ostracize me. So I think even from my parents, like, a lot of the unacceptance came from a place of fear of being like, I just don't want my child to be hurt, which again, I can understand now because there's that distance between the time when it was happening. But yeah, I just want to, it was definitely hard at the beginning, but the positive reception that I got from like sort of family members and the spiritual community when I came out was, I think, not just really affirming for me, but really affirming for them as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think, like, if you're not Indian, but you know that we have a very small knit society where you say one thing on one end, and by in 3 days time the rest of the whole world knows, and then their cousins know, and now it's talk of the town. And especially when we as a culture haven't had these conversations in older generations. Like, even for myself, I'm 30 now, and I've only started having these conversations when I was 27, 28, 29, 30 years old. This isn't something that was in our education system. This isn't something that was a point of discussion when we were kids. So for me to change my mind takes a little bit of time. So for them to change their mind and their perception and seeing the world, that's obviously going to take a little bit of time too. And I'm so glad that even though I'm sure it wasn't easy, that it must have tested your patience. But again, with the community around you supporting you, must have made it easier for them. And I want to speak about